If you've ever had the fantasy of soaring over bumper-to-bumper traffic in a flying vehicle, that may be possible sooner than you think. Not with a flying car, but with a battery-powered aircraft called an EVTOL, a clunky acronym for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Vehicle. As we first reported in April, dozens of companies are spending billions of dollars to make EVTOLs that will operate like air taxis, taking off and landing from what are called vertiports on the tops of buildings, parking garages, or helipads in congested cities. EVTOLs promise a faster, safer, and greener mode of transportation, potentially changing the way we work and live. Sound too good to be true? We went for a joyride to find out.
I will arm the aircraft if you are ready.
Yeah, totally.
Confirm clear above.
If this looks like an oversized drone I'm about to take off in, that's pretty much what it is.
Breaking ground right there.
It's a single-seat EVTOL called Hexa, powered by 18 propellers, each with its own battery. No jet fuel required.
You are in control.
Onboard computers automatically adjust for altitude and wind.
You can really feel the wind up here.
So all I had to do was use a joystick to control Hexa's movement and speed. It took about 30 minutes of pre-flight training to get the hang of it.
Use that yaw to rotate 90 degrees. Wonderful.
Hexa is still in its testing phase, so I had to stay close to Chief Pilot Jace McCown and his ground crew. But they say it's flown up to 195 feet in the air at 24 miles per hour.
Whenever you're ready, you can come back to home.
The batteries last up to 15 minutes.
I was going to try to land over the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
To land, I maneuvered Hexa into position, pressed a button, and the computers did the rest.
Right there, you are on the ground, and the props are spinning down.
That is cool. I can't stop laughing.
Piece of cake,
That was
right?
awesome.
Is it
That
fun?
is so much fun.
Yes.
Wow. I so just want to take off with it.
I know.
Matt Chasen is CEO of Austin-based Lyft Aircraft, which makes Hexa. He envisions a future where it's used by commuters to skip rush hour traffic.
You can fly 10 miles in 10 minutes instead of spending over an hour on the roads during rush hour congestion.
Would it be something that an individual then in the future owns and flies from their house to somewhere?
We don't see individual ownership as very practical. These are very expensive aircraft. We see putting fleets of aircraft at locations where we provide maintenance, we provide training, and people can come in and basically pay per flight.
But that's still a long way off. Federal, state, and local regulators, not to mention the nation's airspace, aren't ready for hundreds of thousands of commuters piloting their own EVTOLs in the skies over congested cities. So to give people a taste of the future now, Chasen designed Hexa as an ultralight vehicle, which means it doesn't have to go through the Federal Aviation Administration's complex certification process, but also can't fly over populated areas. Chasen plans to start offering rides to paying customers for $250 by the end of this year.
The initial market you see is essentially joyrides for people.
Yeah, I think there's a huge market for people to just experience the thrill and joy of flight.
Around the world, all kinds of EVTOLs are being developed. Cargo carriers, air ambulances, and a whole lot of air taxis. Some with a pilot, some without. The Air Force is investing, so is Airbus and American Airlines. And dozens of companies are already working with the FAA. It's not the flying cars that science fiction movies anticipated.
No, but when you think about it, I look back over the arc of my own career, having been a pilot for 42 years, and I'm just amazed by the amount of innovation that has taken place.
Billy Nolan was head of safety for the FAA before being named acting administrator in March. How difficult a certification process is there? Because there's a lot of moving parts to this.
First, we have to certify the design of the aircraft itself, and then we look at how it will operate. Is it piloted? Is it autonomous? We look at where it will operate, so that means how do we put it within our nation's airspace? So once it's met that safety threshold, and only until it's met that safety threshold will we be prepared to certify it.
Some EVTOL companies are well on their way. We flew in a gas-guzzling helicopter with one of the frontrunners in this air taxi arms race, Joe Ben Beverk, CEO of Joby Aviation. He took us to this remote facility in California where he was testing his EVTOL Joby aircraft. As we landed, it felt like the old guard meeting the new.
Obviously, it's a combination of a helicopter and a plane.
Exactly. So it can take off like a helicopter, but it flies with the efficiency of an airplane.
Beverett has been working on the Joby for more than a decade. It has 6 propellers and 4 batteries in its wings and will operate as an air taxi, carrying a pilot and 4 passengers. He says it can fly 150 miles on a single charge and has a top speed of around 200 miles an hour.
Why this design?
So vertical takeoff is important so we can take you to where you want to go, right? We don't need a huge runway. And then with the wing, it gives you the efficiency to fly far and to fly fast.
Pilot, you're cleared. Flight box alpha blow.
Because it's still being tested, the Joby was piloted remotely by a nearby ground crew.
Planets for flight.
When they fired up the motors, unlike a helicopter, the Joby didn't need time to warm up. It took off in about 20 seconds.
That's it? That's really quiet.
We wanted this to sound more like the wind in the trees than the whop-whop of a helicopter.
Noise levels are a critical issue since EVTOLs are meant to take off and land near where people work and live.
This is below the background noise level of many cities. You know, I go around with my decibel meter on my phone and like measure sound levels.
That's what you've been doing for 10 years?
Exactly, because we needed to make sure that the aircraft was going to be quiet enough.
Beverett studied mechanical engineering at Stanford, where he invented this popular flexible camera tripod, and later created a company that made flying wind turbines. But the Joby had remained an elusive dream.
There were definitely skeptics, even good friends of mine, who didn't believe that you could make this with batteries and electric propulsion.
The battery technology just wasn't there, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Beverett hired Jon Wagner away from Tesla, where he helped develop the car's revolutionary batteries. At Joby, he figured out a way to make the batteries lighter, but still powerful enough to get the 2-ton EVTOL off the ground.
You had to play to the strengths of battery power and the strengths of electric motors. So a typical aircraft might have one big motor, but we can have 6 motors distributed throughout the aircraft, and in that way, operate in a much more efficient manner.
The weight of everything must be the most important thing.
Absolutely.
So how do you make a plane as light as possible?
You essentially have to engineer every piece of it.
The outside of the Joby is made with layers of lightweight carbon fiber. The batteries, as well as computers, electronics, and motors, are constructed under Jon Wagner's watch. And his team shakes, bakes, and spins them to ensure they'll meet the FAA's rigorous safety standards.
They have to certify the aircraft as being safe and capable of flying to their standards. They also have to certify the production of all the parts of it.
Exactly, and the operation, the pilot training, the maintenance steps, every facet is heavily regulated.
All this costs a lot of money. Toyota has invested about $400 million in Joby, and Beverett took the company public last year.
I think the texture's good.
Billionaire Paul Sciarra, co-founder of the website Pinterest, has also put in a small fortune. He's Joby's executive chairman and says they'll launch in up to 3 cities, and that passengers will eventually end up paying around $3 to $4 a mile to fly, a little more than an average Uber ride.
Can you just take me through, as a passenger, what it looks like? I want to get to JFK Airport. It's bumper-to-bumper traffic. What do I do?
Take out your phone, pull out an app, and with one click, you're booking the whole trip. So a car is coming to wherever you are in Manhattan. It's taking you to the takeoff and landing location, the vertiport, and you're hopping in your Joby, and it's flying you to your final destination. Now maybe there's a car at the other end, or you're just walking to the tail end.
If people are taking cars to and from vertiports, doesn't that just add to congestion?
If we're able to, take out 80% of the miles that people might be traveling and move those miles from congested roads to the air, I think that's going to have an impact.
But just a few weeks after we saw this Joby aircraft fly, it crashed in February due to what federal investigators called a component failure. No one was hurt, but the EVTOL was totaled. Beverett says that's all part of the testing process and is as optimistic now as he was when we interviewed him.
How far are you from getting the first Joby in the sky with passengers?
So we are launching our service in 2024.
You think you can do it that quickly?
Yes.
There have been, though, a lot of companies that have said, oh, we're going to do this in 2 years, and then it doesn't happen.
We're very confident.
There's a lot of confidence over at Whisk Aero as well, though the EVTOL they're developing will be even more complicated to bring to market because it's fully autonomous. There'll be passengers, but no pilot on board. You're not just figuring out an electric vehicle, you're figuring out a fully autonomous flying vehicle.
That's right. We're going for it. You and I talked about that.
CEO Gary Geisen says they're on track to spend about $2 billion. The company is bankrolled by Boeing and Google co-founder Larry Page. They've been testing the technology for the last 8 years.
Control Zap, in position for liftoff.
So how many test flights have you actually done?
So close to 1,600 test flights without, knock on wood, without an incident.
Selecting liftoff now.
We watched one of those test flights in Hollister, California. A team of engineers about half a mile away started the EVTOL with the click of a mouse. The entire route was pre-programmed. Why autonomous?
Yeah.
Why go this route?
So we're going straight to self-flying, several reasons. One, it's safer.
Safer, he says, because most plane accidents involve human error. Much of commercial aviation is already automated, and Geisen sees the entire EVTOL industry going that way eventually. He's determined to get there first.
We do it primarily from a safety perspective, but also scale. So if you don't have a pilot in the aircraft, it's less expensive. You don't have to do pilot training. You're flying 4 passengers. We can charge less. We don't want this to be a premium helicopter-like service. We want this to be a service that's affordable to the masses.
There is a hurdle psychologically for people to get into an aircraft that does not have a human at the controls.
Of course. And so what we're trying to do with that is each passenger can be in verbal communication with the ground. They can be talking to a pilot whenever they want to. So it's all designed to provide comfort. It will take time. This isn't going to happen overnight.
Geisen wants to launch Whisk's 4-seater air taxi service in the world's 20 busiest cities within the next decade.
Wheels down.
You don't give a date of when you think you'll be operational.
Yeah, you know why we don't do that? Because we are not in control of that part. The FAA is, in Europe it's called EASA, they're in charge. So when they certify aircraft to fly, that's when you fly.
The FAA won't say when an autonomous EVTOL might be certified, but acting administrator Billy Nolan told us hailing a piloted air taxi by 2024 is well within the realm of possibility.
The challenge for us is to make sure that innovation doesn't come at the expense of safety. But clearly we are seeing the emergence of something that's fantastic, I think.
This is real. I mean, this is no longer just the stuff of fantasy.
We want to be very careful. We want to be very measured, but you're absolutely right. This is real and this is happening. We've come a long way from where we were just, a mere decade ago.
If you have ever suffered through what felt like an endless flight on a cramped plane, you might jump at the chance to get to your destination in half the time. Does New York to Los Angeles in under 3 hours sound appealing? The last commercial supersonic flight was almost 20 years ago, and even then, superfast flights were only on very limited routes. Most of today's jetliners actually fly more slowly than they did 20 or 30 years ago in order to save fuel. But that may be about to change. It's still a long shot, but as we first reported last November, private startup companies with a big assist from NASA may just give us all another chance to fly faster than the speed of sound. When British Airways Flight 002 roared into the New York sky on October 24, 2003, everyone on board, passengers and pilots, knew that something special was coming to an end.
Enjoy the moment, as you are the last people in the world as passengers to cruise at twice the speed of sound.
The Supersonic Concorde, a joint effort of the British and French governments, was making its last flight after nearly 30 years in the air, grounded by a combination of stratospheric costs and safety concerns after a deadly crash in 2000. Even people watching that last landing in London were emotional.
I just love airplanes. And there's not going to be anything like Concorde again, is there? Never.
Well, you know that old maxim, never say never.
Supersonic's coming back, and it's going to be different this time. It's back to stay.
Blake Scholl is the founder and CEO of Boom. His audacious goal is to build a new supersonic airliner from scratch. Has a private company ever built a supersonic aircraft anywhere?
No, nowhere. It's been governments and militaries only.
Boom is not the only American startup company in the new supersonic sweepstakes. Spike is developing an ultra-fast business jet, and Hermeus aspires to make a hypersonic plane that would fly 5 times the speed of sound. But Boom is the only entrant to actually build an airplane. This is it?
That's it.
Oh, wow. So far, Blake Scholl and Boom have built this single-seater test plane, which they hope will fly this year. The passenger jet meant to follow is called Overture. It only exists in artist renderings, but it's real enough for one of America's largest airlines to climb on board. So is the Overture the plane that United recently ordered?
That's right. United just ordered 15 Overture airplanes. So more Overtures than Concords were ever delivered into service.
Is this United deal like a stamp of approval?
I think it's incredibly validating. When you are United, you take these things really seriously.
Seriously enough to produce a slick promotional video that's already playing on many United flights. The ad may say Supersonic is here, but it's not yet. Blake Scholl is a software engineer who started his career at Amazon, not in aerospace, but he insists he's going to make it happen.
When I look several decades out, what I want is to be able to be anywhere in the world in 4 hours for $100. Now that's not where we start, but that's the end goal.
The Concorde charged thousands of dollars for a one-way flight from New York to London. How is it going to be possible for you to have a similar flight experience for $100?
You keep iterating. And so the same way, for example, electric cars, when they first came out, they were pretty expensive, but we kept working on them and the price came down, they got better and better. And so we're gonna do the same thing with supersonic jets. We're gonna keep working on them, we're gonna keep innovating.
This industry needs people dreaming big. That is essential. This industry was built on that.
John Ostrower is editor-in-chief of The Air Current, a publication that tracks every development in commercial aviation, including Boom and Blake Scholl. He admits that it's something like he is proposing has never been done by a private company before. But yet he's convinced that he can do it. Do you think he can?
I think you cannot ignore the obstacles that will be on the path to getting there. And I think the amount of money that is required to make this happen makes this a very long shot.
How much money will it take?
Probably in the neighborhood of at least 15 or 20 billion.
Ostrower says that's about what it cost Boeing to develop and build and certify a new subsonic airliner. And they already have huge manufacturing facilities. Boom doesn't. Blake Scholl told us he can get Overture built for $7 to $8 billion. But that's a lot more than the $300 million he's raised so far. And money's not the only hurdle. Boom and United have promised their new plane will operate on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. But that doesn't exist yet in anything like the quantities they'll need. Oh, and one other thing.
They're going to need an engine to do this.
And they don't have the engine yet.
They don't have an engine.
Blake Scholl says an engine is on the way from the same company that built the supersonic engines for the Concorde.
And we are working with Rolls-Royce on a custom jet engine that will power Overture.
You're working with Rolls-Royce. It doesn't. This engine does not exist yet.
It is a lightly customized engine, and part of that is Rolls-Royce's work, where they're kind of turning some design knobs.
Blake Scholl doesn't dismiss the skeptics, but he points to the example of Elon Musk and says not so long ago, no one thought he could build Teslas and reusable rockets. Where's this passion come from?
It's because we stopped making progress on the speed of travel. The airplanes we have today are no faster than the ones we had when my parents were growing up. And there is no good reason for that. It doesn't have to be. We can fix it.
When do you expect the first paying customers to fly on one of your planes?
By the end of the decade.
Supersonic really only makes sense on flights of 4 or 5 hours or more, but thousands of such routes are out of reach to Boom. The reason is in the very name of his company. That's the sound of a sonic boom created by a plane breaking the sound barrier. Listen again. The first boom was made by Chuck Yeager's X-1 rocket plane when it passed through Mach 1, about 660 miles per hour, back in 1947.
And he does it.
What is the sonic boom? What generates it?
So when an aircraft flies faster than the speed of sound, it creates disturbances.
Mike Buonanno is a top engineer at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works aircraft design studio in California. Dave Richardson is his boss.
A lot of us understand the wake that's generated by a ship or a boat. And so imagine that wake from a speedboat or whatever, all those different waves coming to be one large wave.
Those individual disturbances created up by the airplane, they combine together to make a loud double bang.
The Federal Aviation Administration tested the impact of that big bang back in 1964 by flying military supersonic jets like these over Oklahoma City for 6 months. The outcome? Broken bricks and ceilings, frayed nerves, and public outrage.
It was just patently obvious that no one was going to tolerate such a loud noise on a day-to-day basis.
The result was a ban on civilian supersonic flights everywhere in the world other than over open water.
And that basically hit the brakes on the development of commercial air travel in terms of advancing speed. Up until that ban, every decade, air travel had gotten faster and faster.
The ban remains in place today, so if Boom gets its overture in the air, it will only be able to serve long transoceanic routes similar to what the Concorde flew.
So if you want to go from JFK in New York to Paris, that's okay. But for many of us, we want to fly places over land. Here living in Los Angeles, almost everywhere I want to go, flying east requires overland travel, and that's one of the big problems that we're trying to solve.
Buonanno and Richardson and their Lockheed Martin team have been commissioned by NASA to build a test plane that can fly twice as fast as current airliners without rattling nerves or breaking windows. Your mission is to get rid of this sonic boom.
That's right. The entire point of the airplane is to reduce sonic boom.
The airplane is called the X-59. It will look like this when it makes its first flight later this year. For now, it looks like this inside Lockheed Martin's assembly building.
You're looking at the cockpit of the airplane, and there's no forward windscreen. This is it.
Every part of the X-59 is streamlined and smooth to disperse sound waves and transform the loud sonic boom into a much quieter thump.
If you look at it, it's pretty slick. I mean, it looks like a dart.
Nils Larson is the NASA test pilot whose job it will be to prove that the X-59 can replace the sonic boom with a simple thump. Later this year, he'll pilot some of the early test flights and then its first sound tests.
That's coming to a town near you. So our researchers are going to work with the public, and we're going to fly over various cities and towns, and they're going to give us the feedback of that thump. Was that thump too loud? You know, did you even hear it at all?
So if you are able to fly over populated areas and provide this data, then the FAA will use this data perhaps to lift this ban.
Exactly.
Are we likely to see planes in the future flying supersonic that look like this one?
I certainly hope so, and I think you will. So there are definite things that you would see if you walked into a commercial, supersonic airplane here, 10, 12 years from now, and you were to look at that, you could see, some DNA that goes back to the X-59.
Larson took us over to NASA's X-59 flight simulator, and the first thing we noticed is that there's a TV screen in place of the missing windshield. For you, does it work as well as using your own eyes?
So far, I think it does. About to go through Mach 1. There's Mach 1. You see it wasn't.
So we're now going supersonic.
Yep, you're now supersonic.
Larson gave me a turn in the cockpit, not to fly supersonic, but to land the X-59, which is tricky given that it's shaped like a pencil, has no windshield, and I'm not a pilot.
Come up, follow them up just a little bit, so pull back just a little bit more, and just hold it right there. Just hold it right there. There you go. He just landed the X-59 in the middle of the runway. That's better than I did. Yeah. Sign him up.
Nils Larsen will start test flying the real X-59 later this year, and soon after that, he'll be flying it over us. And if it's quiet enough, future planes that follow its design lead could eventually fly us lots of places, twice as fast as we can get there now. When might I be able to fly from New York to Los Angeles in a supersonic plane?
There's a long line of things that have to happen, starting with the X-59. But I think 2035 is your answer. If everything marches along the way that it's supposed to.
It's something that people have been trying to solve for decades. Have you guys solved that problem?
We believe we have. It's rewarding seeing it getting built, but I think that real aha moment for me is going to be when I hear that first shaped boom from X-59.
Thump, thump.
The thump, thump.
We won't hear this bang. And when we hear or don't hear that sound is when we know we did it.
Lockheed Martin and NASA plan the first test flights of their X-59 sometime this year. For its part, Boom has chosen the location for the factory where it intends to build the Overture airliner, Greensboro, North Carolina. But it still doesn't have an engine for the Overture.
You know that universal sign we give truckers hoping they'll sound their air horns? Well, you're going to be hearing a lot less honking in the future, and with good reason. The absence of an actual driver in the cab. We may focus on the self-driving car, but autonomous trucking is not an if, it's a when. And the when is coming sooner than you might expect. Already, companies have been quietly testing their prototypes on public roads. Right now, there's a high-stakes, high-speed race pitting the usual suspects, Google and Tesla and other global tech firms, against small startups smelling opportunity. The driverless semi will convulse the trucking sector and the 2 million American drivers who turn a key and maneuver their big rig every day. And the winners of this derby, they may be poised to make untold billions. They'll change the U.S. transportation grid, and they will emerge as the new kings of the road. It's one of the great touchstones of Americana, the romance and possibility of the open road. All hail the 18-wheeler, hugging those asphalt ribbons, transporting all of our stuff across the fruited plains from sea to shining sea. Though we may not give it a second thought when we click that free shipping icon, truckers move 70% of the nation's goods. But trucking cut a considerably different figure on a humid Sunday last summer on the Florida Turnpike. Starsky Robotics, a tech startup, may have been driving in the right lane, but they passed the competition and did this. Yeah, that's 35,000 pounds of steel thundering down a busy highway with nobody behind the wheel. The test was a milestone. Starsky was the first company to put a truck on an open highway without a human on board. Everyone else in the game with the know-how keeps a warm body in the cab as backup, for now anyway. If you didn't hear about this, you're not alone. In Jacksonville, we talked to Jeff Widows, his son Tanner, Linda Allen, and Eric Richardson, all truckers, and all astonished to learn how far this technology has come.
I wasn't aware till I ran across one on the Florida Turnpike, and it just scares me. I can't imagine, but I didn't know anything about it.
No one's talking about it.
Nobody, never. I didn't know it had come so far, and I'm thinking, wow, it's here.
He's right. The autonomous truck revolution is here. It just isn't much discussed. Not on CB radios and not in state houses. And transportation agencies are not inclined to pump the brakes. From Florida, hang a left and drive 2,000 miles west on I-10, and you'll hit the proving grounds of a company with a fleet of 41 autonomous rigs.
This is a shop floor or this is a laboratory?
It's both.
In the guts of the Sonoran Desert outside Tucson, Chuck Price is Chief Product Officer at Too Simple, a privately held global autonomous trucking outfit valued at more than $1 billion, with operations in the U.S. and China. At this depot, $12 million worth of gleaming self-driving semis are on the move.
Right now we've got safety operators in the cab. How far away are we from runs without drivers?
We believe we'll be able to do our first driver-out demonstration runs on public highways in 2021.
That's the when. As for the how,
our primary sensor system is our array of cameras that you see along the top of the vehicle.
Wow. Heard about souping up vehicles. This takes it to a new level.
It's a little bit different, yeah.
The competition is fierce, so much so their technology is akin to a state secret. But Price points us to a network of sensors, cameras, and radar devices strapped to the outside of the rig, all of it hardwired to an internal AI supercomputer that drives the truck. It's self-contained, so a bad Wi-Fi signal won't wreak havoc on the road.
Our system can see farther than any other autonomous system in the world. We can see forward over a half mile.
You can drive autonomously at night?
We can, day, night, and in the rain. And in the rain at night.
And they're working on driving in the snow. Chuck Price has unshakable confidence in the reliability of the technology, as do some of the biggest names in shipping. UPS, Amazon, and the U.S. Postal Service ship freight with Too Simple trucks. All in, each unit costs more than $250,000. Not a great expense, considering it's designed to eliminate the annual salary of a driver, currently around $45,000. Another savings? The driverless truck can get coast to coast in 2 days, not 4, stopping only to refuel, though a human still has to do that. We wanted to hop in and experience automated trucking firsthand.
I feel like it's our turn on Space Mountain.
Chuck Price was happy to oblige. We didn't know what to expect, so we fashioned more cameras to the rig than NASA glued to the Apollo rockets.
Everybody buckled in?
Buckled in.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
And we hit go.
Autonomous driving started.
We sat in the back alongside the computer. In the front seat,
turn signal is on.
Maureen Fitzgerald, a trucker's trucker with 30 years experience. She was our safety driver, babysitting with no intention of gripping the wheel, but there just in case. Riding shotgun, an engineer, John Pantilla, there to monitor the software. The driverless truck was attempting a 65-mile loop in weekday traffic through Tucson. The route was mapped and programmed in before the run, but that's about it. The rest was up to the computer, which makes 20 decisions per second about what to do on the road. As we rolled past distracted drivers, disabled cars, slowpokes, and sheriffs, our safety driver kept vigil, but never disengaged the driverless system.
Watching the front targets close in, 100, yep, got to cut in right now. 55 mile an hour bad cutoff.
This guy just flagrantly cut us off.
He just really cut us off.
We did not honk at him. Did we disengage?
We did not disengage. This vehicle will detect that kind of behavior faster than the humans.
How far are we from being able to pick up the specific cars that are passing us? Oh, that's Joe from New Jersey with 6 points on his license.
We can read license plates, so if there was an accessible database for something like that, we could.
Chuck Price says that would be valuable to the company, though he admits it could create obvious privacy issues. But Too Simple does collect a lot of data as it maps more and more routes across the Southwest. Their enterprise also includes a fleet of autonomous trucks in Shanghai, as well as a research center in Beijing. The data collected by every truck along every mile, it's uploaded and used by Too Simple, they say only to perfect performance on the road. Maureen Fitzgerald is convinced that Too Simple's technology is superior to human drivers.
You call these trucks your babies.
Right.
What do your babies do well and what could they do better?
This truck is scanning mirrors, looking at 1,000 meters out. It's processing all the things that my brain could never do. And it can react 15 times faster than I could.
Most of her 2 million fellow truckers are less enthusiastic. automated trucking threatens to jackknife an entire $800 billion industry. Trucking is among the most common jobs for Americans without a college education. So this disruption caused by the driverless truck, it cuts deep.
As truckers like to say, if you bought it, a truck brought it.
Steve Pelley is a sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania and an expert in freight transportation and automation. He also spent 6 months driving a big rig.
What segment do you think is going to be hit first by driverless trucks?
I've identified 2 segments that I think are most at risk, and that's refrigerated and dry van truckload. And those constitute about 200,000 trucking jobs. And then what's called line haul. And they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90,000 jobs there.
You're talking 300,000 jobs off the top. That's a big number.
It is a big number.
The Florida truckers we met represent 70 years experience and millions of safe driving miles.
How you doing, Gerald?
They say they love the job, and when asked to describe their work, they kick around words like vital, honest, and patriotic.
Makes you feel like you could just poke your chest out with the responsibility that you're taking on. Yeah. Kind of makes you feel like you're needed.
Asked about driverless trucks, they feel like they are being run off the road. But another issue troubles them even more.
I think that companies need to keep safety in mind. If you have a glitch in a computer at that speed, you can do some damage.
There's too many things that can go wrong.
One of them semis hits something that's small, like a car, passenger car, or anything like that, it's a done deal. I mean,
I was on 75 last month through Ocala, and there was a bad accident. And so the state trooper came out and he was hand signaling people, you go here, you go there. How's an autonomous truck going to recognize what the officer is trying to say or do? How is that going to work?
Sympathy, empathy, fear, code, eye contact. I don't know how you create an algorithm that accounts for all that.
You can't.
Does the public have a right to know if they're testing driverless trucks on the interstate?
Absolutely.
That's our concern, is who's watching this, who's making sure that they're not throwing something unsafe on the road.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is being done with almost no oversight from good governance groups, from the government itself.
Sam Lesh represents 600,000 truckers for the Teamsters. He's concerned that federal, state, and local governments have only limited access to the driverless technology.
A lot of this information, understandably, is proprietary. Tech companies want to keep, their algorithms and their safety data secret until they can kind of get it right. The problem is that in the meantime, they're testing this technology on public roads. They're testing it next to you as you drive down the road.
And that was consistent with our reporting.
Do you have to tell anyone when you test?
No, not for individual tests.
Do you have to tell them where you test?
We do not currently have to tell them where we test in Arizona.
Or how often you test?
No.
Do you have to share your data with any State Department of Transportation?
Currently, we're not required to share data. We would be happy to share data.
What about inspections? Does anyone from the Arizona DOT come by and check the stuff out?
The DOT comes by all the time. We talk with them regularly. It's not a formal inspection process yet.
We wanted to ask Elaine Chao, Secretary of the Department of Transportation, about regulating this emerging sector. She declined an interview but provided us with a statement which reads in part, "The department needs to prepare for the transportation systems of the future by engaging with new technologies to address safety without hampering innovation." To that point, Chuck Price is emphatic that driverless trucks pose fewer dangers.
We eliminate texting accidents,
no texting while driving when there's a computer.
There are no drunk computers, and the computer doesn't sleep. So those are large causes of accidents.
He adds that driverless trucks are more fuel efficient in part because they can stay perfectly aligned in their lane, and unlike humans, are programmed never to speed. But he admits the profit motive is significant.
You think there's a lot of money to be made here?
There's certainly a lot of money to be made. There's an opportunity to solve a very big problem.
Steve Pelley says the industry may be imperfect, but he thinks the solution should not depend on driverless technology alone.
What's your response to the technology companies that say, look, I'm trying to do something more efficiently, and I'm going to improve safety? This is American enterprise. What are you going to get in the way of this for?
I mean, I'd say that's wonderful, but that's not your job. Right? Your job's to make money, right? Policy is going to decide what our outcomes are going to be. Trucking is a very competitive industry. The low road approach often wins.
We talk about the internal combustion engine replacing the horse and buggy and Eisenhower's interstate system. When we talk about these transformational markers in transportation,
yeah,
where's driverless trucking going to rank?
It's going to be one of the biggest.
Back in the 1980s, a laboratory of misfits foresaw our future. Touchscreens, automated driving instructions, wearable technology, and electronic ink were all developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in a place they call the Media Lab. It's a research lab and graduate school program that long ago outgrew its name. Today, it's creating technologies to grow food in the desert, control our dreams, and connect the human brain to the internet. Come have a look at what we found in a place that you could call the Future Factory. To Arnav Kapoor, a graduate student in the Media Lab, the future is silent. He's developed a system to surf the internet with his mind.
What happens is when you're reading or when you're talking to yourself, your brain transmits electrical signals to your vocal cords. You can actually pick these signals up and you can get certain clues as to what the person intends to speak.
So the brain is sending an electrical signal for a word that you would normally speak, but your device is intercepting that signal.
It is.
So instead of speaking the word, your device is sending it into a computer.
That's correct.
That's unbelievable. Let's see how this
works. So we tried it.
What is 45,689 divided by 67?
Sure.
He silently asks the computer and then hears the answer through vibrations transmitted through his skull and into his inner ear.
6, 8, 1.9, 2, 5.
Exactly right.
One more. What's the largest city in Bulgaria, and what is the population?
The screen shows how long it takes the computer to read the words that he's saying to himself.
Sofia, 1.21 million.
That is correct. You just Googled that.
I did.
You could be an expert in any subject. You have the entire internet in your head.
That's the idea.
Ideas are the currency of MIT's Media Lab. The lab is a 6-story Tower of Babel, where 230 graduate students speak dialects of art, engineering, biology, physics, and coding, all translated into innovation.
The Media Lab is this glorious mixture, this renaissance, where we break down these formal disciplines and we mix it all up and we see what pops out. That's the magic, that intellectual diversity.
Hugh Herr is a professor who leads an advanced prosthetics lab.
And what do you get from that? You get this craziness when you put like a toy designer next to a person that's thinking about what instruments will look like in the future next to someone like me that's interfacing machines to the nervous system. You get really weird technologies. You get things that no one could have conceived of.
The Media Lab was conceived in a 1984 proposal. MIT's Nicholas Negroponte wrote, "Computers are media that will lead to interactive systems." He predicted the rise of flat panel displays, HD TVs, and news whenever you want it. Negroponte became co-founder of the lab and its director for 20 years.
When we were demonstrating these things in, let's say, 85, 86, 87, it was really considered new.
It looked like magic.
It's indistinguishable from magic.
In 1979, MIT developed Movie Map, which predated Google Street View by decades.
You are going north on Aspen Street.
Now, notice what's so common today that you didn't even notice it. He's touching the screen. If you had seen that on 60 Minutes in the 80s, you would have been amazed. And you might have been dazzled by one of the earliest flat screens.
It was 6 inches by 6 inches, black and white. It was a $500,000 piece of glass.
It cost $500,000.
Called $500,000, that piece of glass. And I said, that piece of glass will be 6 feet in diagonal with millions of pixels in full color.
In 1997, the lab also gave birth to the grandfather of Siri and Alexa.
Pneumatic, wake up.
Okay, I'm listening.
Go to my email.
Where do you want to go?
And in 1989, it created turn-by-turn navigation that it called Backseat Driver.
They're right at the stop sign.
And the MIT patent lawyers looked at it and said, this will never happen, never be done, because the insurance companies won't allow it, so we're not going to patent it.
Look through the glass-walled labs today, and you will witness 400 projects in the making. The lab is developing pacemaker batteries recharged by the beating of the heart, self-driving taxi tricycles that you summon with your phone, phones that do retinal eye exams,
I will tell you 2 stories.
and teaching robots.
So we think that the devices of tomorrow have an opportunity to do so much more and to fit better in our lives.
Professor Patty Maas ran the graduate program's student admissions for more than a decade.
We really select for people who have a passion. We don't have to tell them to work hard. We have to tell them to work less hard and to get sleep occasionally.
How often does a student come to you with an idea and you think, we're not going to do that?
Actually, for us, the crazier, the better.
Typically, there's some blood vessels running.
Adam Horowitz's idea was so nutty, he was one of 50 new students admitted last year out of 1,300 applications.
I was really interested in a state of sleep where you start to dream before you're fully unconscious, where you keep coming up with ideas right as you're about to go to sleep.
Time to go to sleep.
Horowitz's system plants ideas for dreams,
Remember to think of a mountain.
then records conversations with the dreamer during that semi-conscious moment before you fall asleep.
Tell me, what are you thinking?
I'm doing an origami pyramid.
Her origami pyramid dream was influenced by the robot saying the word mountain. It's long been believed that this is the moment when the mind is its most creative. Horowitz hopes to capture ideas that we often lose by the next morning.
So it's basically like a conversation. You can ask, hey, Jibo, I'd like to dream about a rabbit tonight. It would watch for that trigger of unconsciousness. And then right as you're hitting the lip, it triggers you with the audio, and it asks you, what is it that you're thinking about? You record all that sleep talking, and then later, when you wake up fully, you can ask for those recordings.
And when he brought this idea to you, what did you think? Really?
Crazy enough.
Yeah.
Welcome to the world of bodies and motions.
Nearby in Hugh Herr's lab, Everett Lawson's brain is connected to his prosthetic foot, a replacement for the clubfoot he was born with.
The very definition of a leg or a limb or an ankle is going to dramatically change with what they're doing. It isn't just whole, it's 150%.
You feel directly connected, huh?
Yeah, when I fire a muscle really fast, it makes its full sweep.
Herr's team has electronically connected the computers in the robotic foot with the muscles and nerves in Lawson's leg.
He's not only able to control via his thoughts, he can actually feel the designed synthetic limb. He feels the joints moving as if the joints are made of skin and bone. So you're going to test on...
For Professor Herr, necessity was the mother of invention. He lost his legs to frostbite at age 17 after he was stranded by a winter storm while mountain climbing.
Through that recovery process, my limbs are amputated. I designed my own limbs. I returned to my sport of mountain climbing. I was climbing better than I'd achieved with normal biological limbs. That experience was so inspiring because I realized the power of technology to heal, to rehabilitate, and even extend human capability beyond natural physiological levels.
You developed the legs that you're wearing today.
Each leg has 3 computers actually and 12 sensors, and they run these computations based on the sensory information that's coming in. And then what's controlled is a motor system, like muscle, that drives me as I walk, enable me to walk at different speeds.
What will this mean for people with disabilities?
Technology is freeing. It removes the shackles of disability from humans. And the vision of the Media Lab is that one day, through advances in technologies, we will eliminate all disability.
So that was a big deal, because then...
The current director of the Media Lab is Joey Ito, a 4-time college dropout and one of those misfits that the lab prefers. After success in high-tech venture capital, he came here to preside over the lab's 30 faculty and a $75 million annual budget.
How do you pay for all this?
So we have 90 companies that pay us a membership fee to join the consortium. And then because it's all coming into one pot, I can distribute the funds to our faculty and students, and they don't have to write grant proposals. You don't have to ask for permission. They just make things.
Do any of these companies lean on you from time to time and say, hey, we need some product here?
They do. I've fired companies for that.
You fired them?
Yeah, I've told companies, you're too bottom line oriented. Maybe we're not right for you.
The sponsors, which include Lego, the toy maker, Toshiba, ExxonMobil, and General Electric, get first crack at inventions. The lab holds 302 patents and counting.
We're inside of the lab. We have
Caleb Harper's idea is so big it doesn't fit in the building, so MIT donated the site of an abandoned particle accelerator for this trained architect who is now building farms.
Welcome to the farm.
He calls these food computers, farms where conditions are perfect.
They're all capable of controlling climate. So they make a recipe. This much CO2, this much O2, this temperature. So we create a world in a box. Most people understand if you say, oh, the tomatoes in Tuscany on the North Slope taste so good and you can't get them anywhere else. That's those genetics under those conditions that cause that beautiful tomato. So we study that inside of these boxes with sensors and the ability to control climate.
Tuscany in a box.
Tuscany in a box, Napa in a box, Bordeaux in a box.
Now these are plants you're growing in air.
Yeah, so
these basil plants grow not in soil, but in air.
The plant is super happy.
No dirt.
Air saturated with a custom mix of moisture and nutrients.
So each one of these are drops that drops down to the reservoir.
The food computers grow almost anything, anywhere.
What have you learned about cotton farming?
So cotton is actually a perennial plant, which means it would grow, the whole year long, but it's treated like an annual. We have a season. So in this environment, since it's perfect for cotton, we've had plants go 12 months.
So how many crops can you get in a controlled environment like this?
You can crop up to 4 or 5 seasons. We're growing on average 3 to 4 times faster than they can grow in the field.
The uncommon growth of the Media Lab flows from its refusal to be bound to goals, contracts, or next quarter's profits. It is simply a ship of exploration, going wherever a crazy idea may lead.
We get to think about the future. What does the world look like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? What should it look like? The best way to predict the future is to invent it.